So we got Kaushal from WND Ventures, and what we're going to be talking about today and what we wanted to understand is really your life journey in terms of your career arc, which is very much a reflection of how construction technology and its interaction to construction companies has changed. So you started in a BIM to a VDC to innovation at DPR to setting up WND Ventures, and now WND Ventures is really kind of rethinking the strategic focus and how they engage with and interact with startups as the CVC of DPR Construction. So, first off, thank you for, spending the time coming here. But I wanted to start off with really starting at the start of your career journey and how you got that interest in technology and, what were you doing in the BIM world, as I would say?
Just to clarify, WND actually existed before I came to the group. So I didn't form WND, right? Mm-hmm. It was there as part of DPR's venture arm. It started in 2017. So for me, funny story with technology. I've always been curious about technology. I had a computer when I was like 10 years old in the 90s, first to get into dial-up and all that. And so I've always been curious and always, tech savvy to get into technology, and I really enjoy that. I got into construction after I got out of active duty in the Air Force, and I didn't really know where I wanted to go. And so I just joined a company, a large builder, tons of years of history, and didn't know what I was going to do. So I was an estimator as my first job in construction, and I learned really how to read drawings, understand how to price drawings, and understand how a project comes up and kind of visualize that virtually in my head. That was around 2006, and at this time Revit was starting to come out in the industry, and I got excited. I was like, okay, so I'm looking at these drawings in 2D, and there's a chance I can build better. And so I got into BIM. I got into Revit, started playing around with Navisworks in 2007, 2008. And that's really where I grew my passion for technology and construction. I came to DPR in 2011, been with the company since, almost 14 years now. And I was a VDC manager for our Sacramento office, and my goal was to try to get tech in as many hands as I can as possible. This was around the time iPads were coming out, so we're trying to figure out how to get models into the iPads. We were trying to figure out how to digitize workflows. So we had large monitors and computers in our trailers, so that we were trying to eliminate paper as much as possible. Trying to figure out tricky workflows using Dropbox and Box to view drawings on the iPads and do the digital slip sheeting of posting drawings and things like that. I've always been curious and like this tinkering attitude of trying to figure things out. It's always been part of my DNA.
Yeah.
And
then,
and then that's how I led from that to joining the corporate team to be our innovation leader.
Yeah, okay. So I guess taking a step back, because it's quite a different time when you were in 2011, I guess PlanGrid, all these new companies are coming out, but how did we really see and what was that VDC role looked at? Like what was VDC and what were they doing? Because that role still exists today, but it feels very different to what it was back then.
Yeah, back then I think, just like any builder, what I really enjoy and love about DPR is every member of the team is a builder, right? So even as a VDC manager, I was looked at as a builder. I did my building in 3D and virtually. And so my job was, okay, the stuff that I'm learning about VDC in this project, what are the things that our project team needs to know about? And what are the constructability issues that we need to hash out before we go start building, right? Because then it becomes real money and it's expensive.
So how is the digital role playing in that, right? Because before that VDC role, what were they doing before? Just paper-based, looking at drawings, figuring out constructability, and then how is you using the model and you using technology, how were you able to pain point?
Oh, I mean, everything. Even when I was doing it was all very 3D based.
Yeah,
We had a lot of tech savvy architects and engineers that also were using Revit as a way to design the model or design the building. And what's nice is that technology has continued to evolve and the tools have become, better and allows you to have deeper level of analysis. Something with Revit that always remains as a challenge is, you can't get super high level of detail. So sometimes you have to show details in one place but not the other, just so that the computer can process all that digital data. Your question was, how is it changing now?
Yeah, so how's it changing? Because that really feels like and sounds like a very BIM heavy workflow, or the implementation of BIM, which I think at least for me there's almost a split of is BIM even real? A part of me always thinks that. So I'm curious as to how back then you have these models, you're implementing, you're doing constructability, and then at some point it seems like it changed to a little bit more of a broader landscape of point
Yes,
solutions.
yes.
So yeah, could
So
you
what
just
does that
share
change?
Yeah, how did that change come about?
What's changing now is, you have all these other technologies that are also enabling you to do construction better. So BIM in a nutshell is data, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at AI technologies, they rely heavily on data. So if you do BIM well, it allows you to expand that use case into something else and use something like AI to help you speed up the mundane tasks, that are sometimes follow up after that. We were able to do prefabrication better because you have a high level of detail model that allows you to break down your building into components that you can prefab off-site and then bring it on-site. We're able to have digital data on life cycle of projects, right? So then you can have buildings that you've built 10 years ago that could maybe provide some insights on what you're about to build next year or this year, right? So you have this digital data and you have things like AI that help you kind of bridge those gaps in a quicker way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Because at that point in time, BIM was really the focus, which was really data management. And then at some point you moved from VDC to innovation. And I think DPR is well known or well discussed when I've talked to people as one of the most innovative or tech forward builders. So I'm curious as to what changes from you in a VDC role where it sounds like you're implementing a lot of tech to what is a traditional innovation role today. People will always say, hey, I'm an innovation manager, I'm looking at pain points, I'm implementing tech. So that almost sounds like the VDC role from what I'm hearing, but it is different. So what is that difference between these two roles that you did?
The innovation role is more culturally focused, and again, you're looking at how to improve on broken processes, right? Which is no different than a VDC role, right? I'm looking at how is this building broken, how am I trying to fix it, right? So what are the areas I need to address for constructability? And deploying BIM and VDC, we always took a people, process, and technology approach. So people, who are the people that are going to be, involved in this? What's the process that's in place? What needs to be in place? And then what kind of tech fits in, right? There's tons of different VDC solutions, right? There's Revit, there's Tekla, there's Bentley systems, right? And we've always tried to understand which solution fits our needs best with people and process in front of them. And same thing with innovation, right? It's very easy to get caught up into technology hype and then start chasing shiny objects, and that's probably the worst thing you can do. And with innovation, you have to be very disciplined. And so what I realized is that as a company, our culture was very strong in the sense where our people are not afraid of trying things, and our people actually want to learn how to do things better. So my job was to figure out, how do I help them do that? How do I help them experiment and not be afraid of trying and failing, right?
And how do you do that, right? Because the risk in construction is so high, and I know of so many people who are afraid to try solutions because they know of this one person who tried a solution, it failed and potentially got fired. And when that risk is so high and the risk of a new technology failing, how do you either test it in an incremental way or test it in a safe way? How are you building this foundational layer for the culture to be this way?
We started by just simply defining things differently. So for example, there's no such thing as a successful or a failed pilot. We say, what did you learn from it? We focus on the learning aspect. We do also emphasize that just because you're buying a cool piece of tech like a VR headset or a HoloLens or something doesn't necessarily mean you're being innovative. We created a framework where people that want to try things, they have to apply for that funding, right? And my team provided that funding. And so we said, what problem are you trying to solve? What's the metric that you're using as your baseline? So that when the pilot is finished, you're able to say, I improved on these metrics, right? So creating some level of discipline around what we test, and as well as capturing those lessons learned, but then sharing that with the rest of the company so the company's aware.
Yeah.
So those are the things that we hit on very early.
So that's quite an interesting model. So is that a centralized innovation pathway that me as an engineer, I have a use case, I make a business case, and you decide to give me funding? Is that how it works?
We actually have a very distributed team. We have a regional innovation leader who supports multiple offices in that region, and everybody know who that person is. They usually start with that person. That person's also very ingrained and involved in the business unit operations. So they're close to the job sites, they're close to the leadership teams, they're close to all the corporate groups. They they work very cross-functionally. So the idea is if there is a challenge on a job that somebody's trying to solve, there's a good chance that somebody's already solved it, or we're trying something new and a lot of people want to hear about it, right? And so that's why our process framework works really well, where not only do we create a metric for what we're learning, but we also capture that and we share that, broadly. We have an internal system we call the idea mill, where we capture and store all these lessons learned.
Yeah, and then how is that distributed? Anyone as an engineer,
anybody can go in
the
and
idea
access
mills?
that. That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
There's no, it's not locked up in a vault somewhere. It's actually this website you can go to from our intranet, and then you can browse all the past pilots. You can submit a new one of your own. You can browse all the technologies that we're tracking. So there's about 600 plus different solutions that we've tracked and put into our database. There's 200 plus pilots from the last, sort of 3-4 years that we've put in this system. So the idea is we want people to, at their own pace, do some of this self-paced learning. And it's a very searchable database. You can put in use cases and pilots will come up, or you can put in specific names of products and those things will come up as well.
Why did you choose that particular approach? Because I know there's some other companies that have really tried to decentralize it and try and force it, I guess, in that way. Whereas you've opted for a decentralized approach and, hey, some people are more, innovative or want to be more innovative than others. And if they want to be, they can learn even more. Other people can just have a service level. So you've gone for a very, choose your own learning pace.
Correct.
Why is that?
Oh, you just answered the question.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm letting people sort of take it at their own pace, and I want to meet people where they are. And the biggest thing is if I am in a supportive role versus doing role, where somebody says, hey, Kaushal, go figure out this technology, and they're telling me to figure out their problem. Right? That puts me in the spot of doing all the learning, right? I want it to be the other person that has a problem to do the learning. If I enable the business to understand how to solve problems, how to leverage technology to do that, I'm making them critical thinkers and problem solvers, which makes them, a sharp, project manager even sharper at what they do at their job, right? And that's my goal. And so once we do that, we expand our network, we try to support them, and then we meet them where they are.
Does this process work for all companies, or do you think that because you have a culture that is ingrained in being innovative, that this decentralized approach works? Or if you're, earlier in your innovation journey where, it's like, oh, this is the way we've always done things, does this approach work as well? Like, how would you shift your approach based on culture?
Our approach has evolved, and I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. At the time when we deployed that process, it worked because the business was hungry for it.
Yeah.
Now we're a $10 billion plus company, 12,000 plus employees. It's a little different, right? And I don't want to be, pushing tech, to the projects because now, I'm potentially creating a distraction. I don't want to do that. So our process has evolved, to a more structured approach where we're partnering with business leaders and we're partnering regional leaders and operations leaders to say, is this the right time for us to try this tech on your job? And if it is, help us help you. Like, what are the problems you're trying to solve, and let us put our minds together and figure that out.
So how does that push and pull dynamic work of we want to be innovative, so we're going to push some things, but then we need to pull because we need pain point identification being driven by the business?
You got to gauge. It's like a pendulum,
Okay.
And so sometimes you push and sometimes you get pulled.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's, we look for that. And having a very close pulse on the business, understanding the business needs, allows us to get there. We're not perfect, but allows us to get there faster.
And that's why you have that regional approach, right? You have so many people on the ground, you can call them up, and they're trusted people.
Trusted advisors, right?
Yeah.
And that process, actually, that framework is so simple that we try to replicate in other parts of the business too, not just for innovation.
Yeah, okay. And out of curiosity, are there particular success metrics for pilots that you find are better or more commonly used, or is it quite unique what these success metrics are?
Each metric, it's unique to the pilot itself,
Yeah.
because it depends on what is it that it's trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
And you can always say, the typical productivity metrics, safety metrics are always there. There's probably more use cases of those metrics than others, but then there's sometimes it's just simple things like, hey, this thing saved me a few more clicks from doing this and automated a function that was very manual, right? So that could be the simple metric. Let's say I went from doing something manual to then now being fully automated, saved me X number of hours in the day.
That's really interesting. And I guess the question that I always have is, there's always one team that's willing to pilot. there's always a team that's successful pilot, but getting that adoption from one project to 5 projects, 10 projects, 20, what's your process around that? I know you have this website that allows you to see that, but if you see good signs, how do you start to push it, or is it pulling it? We don't
actually push a lot. We just report out on which pilots our team is supporting, and a lot of times the folks on the project are the ones pulling us. Hey, we tried this on our last job. We want to try this on our next job.
Yeah, okay.
And so what happens is when we hit a critical mass of 4 or 5 projects, this is when we talk to our construction technology team and say, hey, you've got this solution. It seems to be bubbling up. A lot more projects are requesting it. We funded it through innovation funds, but we should probably look at it as an enterprise solution at some point, or figure out where does this solution sit, right? If it's an enterprise solution, then maybe the corporate team takes that on. Or it could be just, hey, you know what, we've structured a deal with the startup and they make it available directly to the project for a fixed cost.
That's interesting, because it's quite interesting, the way the startup enters DPR, I'm not too sure, but it might be like a sales process or whatever, but once they're inside, it's kind of like product-led growth or project-led growth. It's what are the people saying? Do people want it? And is it being pulled into the business? But there's a different framing between how to get into a company and then how to cross that chasm of, spreading broadly within the company, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, we've gone through several iterations of that. During COVID was probably the worst, where I think I was probably getting 30 to 40 inbounds a quarter.
From startups.
Yeah. And we had to figure out how do we quickly solve this. It wasn't like that before COVID. I think it was probably close to 10, 15 per quarter. And we were able to sort of gauge that throttle a little bit. We also, at one point, were doing 60 pilots in a year, which is a lot. We realized that we needed to pull back on that because, one, it takes a lot as a team to do 60 pilots, but at the same time, the business cannot absorb 60 solutions. So how do we fix that part, right? So which allowed us to get closer to our leadership team on the technology side to say, let's figure out a process where we can hand these things off. And let's figure out a process when it's the right time to introduce technology to the project so they're not feeling like they're getting bombarded with solutions. And so it's a little bit of sort of understanding and gauging that part of it. And then when the right time comes, we typically just package it and say, hey, this is what you need to know, and this is, the team that you need to work with.
Yeah. And then also at an enterprise level, is it very much you reach out to startups when it's the right time for you to reach out, given your pain points in the internal business? Or have you had situations where startups are reaching out and you're like, oh, actually, this is perfect?
They reach out regardless of what I need.
But what about you actually using it?
We've tried that too, but sometimes things just sit there because we don't have a pilot we don't have anybody that wants to take on that pilot, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not as big of a problem as we thought. We have had solutions that just kind of sit there. Most of them, I think our people are savvy enough to just kind of pick it up and go. There's times where I also walk up on a job site and they're trying something I wasn't even aware of. That's a good sign, right?
Yeah.
I want that. I want people to be able to try things and solve problems, right? They don't need a guy like me to walk up and say, hey, you have approval, right? I don't have that power.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess now switching up the conversation a little bit to, you were in this innovation role and it sounds like you were very good at it and enjoyed it. And then you went to WND Ventures in the CVC. What was before getting into what they do, but what was it for you personally to go from an innovation role to a CVC role?
It was pretty natural, actually. I really enjoyed technology. We talked about that. But I also, I really get a lot of excitement from the business side of technology.
Yeah.
Understanding how to grow a business, understanding how to deploy a tool or a solution, understanding the life cycle of it, right? And the idea of building companies and successful companies was very exciting. Where I'm helping a founder, who has a concept, who's got an MVP, and he wants to take it from that to, multi-million-dollar company. So I had the tools to do that. I had the team to support them. I had the access to the projects that they needed. And so for me, WND was a very natural fit. I saw that as a way of addressing our business's biggest challenges, to say, okay, this one big problem, it's so big that we can't solve it on our own. I need a partner. And that's where a startup can come in and partner with me. It could be an investment, it could be something else.
Yeah. So how does that process look like for you? Because at what point do you do you only invest in startups that are strategically aligned with the business? Yep, so
yes.
That you've already piloted. So at what point do you go, hey, I've piloted X startup, it's doing well, we should invest, right? At what point is this trigger point, or what is your...
So that's a part that, we're trying to figure out with this new strategy, right? To understand how do we shorten our timelines, right? I want to understand, You know, how early can I get in to help a startup? How quickly can I put them close to the problem that they're trying to solve? If I don't do that well, right, the solution's going to struggle a little bit to grow. It might take a little while. So I'm trying to speed up that timeline. And then the investment side of things, I don't want to make a bad deal, but financial return actually is not number one.
Yeah.
It's number 4 or 3.
What are the other two above it?
Operational needs, addressing our operational needs is number 1.
But then how does investment help that operational need, right? Is it just because the startup has more capital and more runway, so it's more likely
It gives them runway. It's more just a commitment from our end. You know, as a strategic, we tend to not write that big of a check, you know, so sometimes the money doesn't really help them that much. But we're exploring that. We're looking at, okay, could we write bigger checks, right? Could we take a bigger swing and then bring in our partners, right? So, for example, if I invest in a startup, it'd be great if I could have other CVCs, you know, that I'm friends with to come in with this investment with me. Because one, capital, right? More capital for the startup. But number 2, now the startup is hearing about the problem from a few different customers, potential customers, right?
Yeah.
And so not only do they have investors, but they also have potential customers. And so I don't want a startup to build a solution just for DPR. That's not going to help them be successful, right? It might give them some insights on how DPR does it, but I want them to learn from Hensel Phelps, Haskell, Turner, whoever they talk to, right? For that product, that company to be successful, they have to have multiple customers, not just DPR.
Yeah. So then I guess at that point, then the question becomes, you know, what's the difference between a CVC versus LPing on an industry-focused fund? Because if you give money to an industry-focused fund, they are, you know, helping out with you identifying startups, but they're also helping them with runway, and then they get access to all of that industry funds. So what's the difference between having a CVC and giving money to a fund that's exclusively investing in construction tech?
Participating as an LP actually opens us up on what trends are about to hit the industry, right? I get insights on when new startups are forming. I get insights on when, you know, industry's technology is now about to leapfrog into construction and potential values that may come out of it, right? It opens up my horizon even more, is what it does by being an LP. You know, diversifies my portfolio in some ways as well, right? But then it also gives me access to the startups that we're invested in indirectly.
Yeah, but then as a CVC, then it just provides even more, like as in, you know, direct investment versus this one. Where is that separation between I'm a construction company, I've given, you know, 5 million to X, these guys are giving me trends and who should access? At what point does it make sense for a construction company at an enterprise level to go, actually, we want this capability in-house and this is giving us something different?
When we're trying to go back to speed up our cycles, right? Like, so one example I can give you, sometimes I won't know a specific technology or startup exists until it's 2 years, 3 years in that they've formed their product.
Yeah.
Right? Working as an LP, I'll know like year 1 if they're working on something and they're looking for some investors. I want to meet them at year 1.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I can really put them in front of subject matter experts. I can put them in front of job sites. I can, you know, with the right type of agreement, maybe even give them access to some of my data. Because that's stuff that they need to build a foundation of the solution, right? Of the problem that they're trying to solve. And so that also is the best time actually to make an investment early on. And so what happens is, you know, we miss the opportunity, the window to invest. But we also come in, you know, much later to where maybe I'm not as much help as I would have been.
And you can't shape the product or influence the product.
I can influence the product, but I want them to, again, learn from others, not just me.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And I guess being a CVC gives you that capability and opportunity to do so at a greater scale.
And we don't operate very strictly like a CVC.
Okay.
Like we're shifting to more of a venture studio style model.
Oh, okay.
Where we're going to build a platform. We're going to have an EIR program where we work with startups very closely. We've got actually 2 startups going through that right now. And the idea is let's bring them in potentially as if they were DPR employees. Let's give them DPR computers and phones, and then have them understand how our data is managed, how our data gets used, you know, in our projects, talk to our subject matter experts and our project teams.
Yeah, okay, so what you're trying to do here is get the founders in early, and you could potentially invest, but you also get a solution that is built to your needs, and then hopefully by them talking to other companies, they can find a generalized pain point.
Correct.
But you know, you win because you get either investment returns, but you also get a solution that fits a pain point that you're really struggling with.
Right.
Yeah, and how did you come about this model? What was the shift? Because I don't think there's other construction companies following that model. Yeah.
No, we've always looked at, I don't know how you explain this, but we're trying to be the most admired company by 2030, which means a lot of our business is focused on that, right? And technology is a way for us to deliver our projects. We don't see that as just a tool. We see that as a key part of our process, right? And so for us, it's like, okay, how do we speed that up? How do we get even more impactful, right? And how do we do that leveraging the capabilities that we have? Venture capital is one of those ways. Is how can I partner with the business at the same time, make an investment in a startup that can help me solve some big problems? Now the challenge is there's tons of solutions out there, but there's still problems that nobody has solved.
Yes.
And I'm not the only one facing that problem. When I talk to my buddies at other general contractor firms, they're also facing that problem. So how do we get closer to solving that, which I know could be an industry solution? That's really the genesis behind all of that.
So how does this EIR program work? So just say I'm a prospective entrepreneur, I come from the construction industry or have an interest in the construction space. Do I apply? And then once I'm in the program, what happens? Are you dropping me in the job site? Are you telling me about pain points that we're looking at? Like, how does this...
We haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
It's still early days.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurs that are going through that right now, we're just kind of, in some ways, just learning from that whole process. The industry itself has its own definition for what a venture studio is, right? And we're probably not, that close to that definition, right? So I'm not bringing in experienced entrepreneurs to then be advisors to startups in my portfolio. Instead, I'm doing something else. I am bringing them in to my company and saying, hey, before you spend some real cash to start building your product, understand the problem, right? Just observe, talk to our teams, talk to our AI machine learning teams, talk to our data development teams, have access to our data. Here's our computer, right? Like that kind of stuff. I want them to just learn and understand the problem before they start building.
Yeah, and I think there's a point that we probably aren't addressing here, which is you're exposing your teams and your people to an entrepreneurial way of thinking.
Yes.
Right? And that's actually probably one of the bigger benefits of them just walking in and going, why? Why?
Fresh eyes.
Yeah, and to them, and then also connecting the dots of, I've done this before from in another industry. That could bring an opportunity.
I mean, the other great part there, sorry to cut you off, is that they execute a lot quicker than a large corporate. And so bringing that speed also is another part of that reason.
But having said that, and especially if you're on the right project, you can bring that speed to market on that project very quickly.
And now we're helping our customers. Our customers really like that part as well.
And what was the shift? So what was it before this shift? Because I know the PR release was maybe a month ago. And what really catalyzed you going, hey, let's take a step back, let's do a review. What we're doing is working or it isn't working, and we want to make this change. How did that come about?
It's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I think we have seen, some technologies now that enable you to do things faster. Right? AI now is a household name.
Yes.
Now are getting to the next level where you can combine them both, AI and robotics, and have something that can actually go out there and do work for you. Right? With all these technologies coming up and sort of creating this enabling environment, I think that's one reason why we said, okay, timing's probably now.
Yeah.
Because before we didn't have tons of solutions like this that we could sort of explore and invest in. Our large language models, companies getting smarter with AI. I think if you don't have AI as a part of your product, you're probably not going to survive because it's pretty much mainstream to where it's part of everything. So we want to make sure that we're part of that wave.
And then, I guess looking forward, what does a successful outcome of this program look like to you? If this kicks all the goals, works at 100%, what does that look like? What does success look like to you in this scenario?
I think if we're delivering transformative innovation to the industry, that's success. And if we're doing that at a quicker pace, one or two companies every 2-3 years, right? That's a quick pace. Yeah. And we're doing that not only for ourselves, but we're also doing that for our closest partners, right? So we're doing this as a big picture, let's just not solve everybody's problem, but let's just solve problems that we know we can solve with our closest partners. Yeah. That's success. And if I can get some good financial returns at the end of the day, that's not bad either.
Yeah. Do you have, I guess this is I don't know if this is a thing that people do, but there's some employees who really love startups and are willing to spend extra hours with startups. And I think the way that it works right now is, me as a company or me as DPR gets the financial return. But it'd be really cool if you had some kind of fractional instrument that, hey, this person on this job site just loves it and is spending 10 hours extra a week every week. Like, could you give them you have a part of the program. So how does
internal incentives for employees.
Yeah, how does that structure? Does it work?
Again, it's something that we've set as a goal to solve.
Yeah.
We haven't quite figured it out yet, but the idea is, when a startup offers an advisory shares to a person to help them, what does that look like? What does that model look like? And could we offer something similar, right, for employees that help me in my portfolio? That's really what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that structure looks like. We haven't figured that out yet, but that's part of the plan.
Yeah, because even, as an extension of this idea of you need an innovation champion on site, someone to bring it in, it'd be really nice if they were tied in a bonus of some way of really helped fuel PlanGrid's approach. And there's a lot of people who would have spent hours on PlanGrid and just going, man, I helped them, but I never got a return.
I will say that we do track the top innovators in the company. And at the end of every year, myself, what I have done is I've sent an email to that person's manager and say, hey, it's end of year compensation and bonuses. Please give this person extra, consideration because they did X, Y, and Z with innovation in the company. So we have done that in the past. We also realized that we do spend a lot of time in startups. We're doing that already.
Yeah.
So why don't we, highlight and reward those people, right? Recognize them, right? That's something that's part of this new plan.
And then how do you track a top innovator? What does a top innovator look like to you? Is it just bringing something to the site, talking about it? Like it feels like a soft metric.
When they take that piece of the culture and make it their own, and then they start spreading the word on their own without us pushing them, that's a top innovator.
Yeah, right. I feel like we hit a lot of points, but that was a really, we really weaved through that conversation. Is there anything else that you want to say about, what you guys are doing, where you're going forward, or anything exciting?
I think we pretty much covered it. I think for me what's exciting is this next wave of AI and robotics and trying to see what that can really do for our industry, especially when we have an aging workforce and shortage of skilled labor. We're also noticing that, job sites are becoming more and more remote. We're getting into locations that are not close to big cities, right? So using robotics and AI will be a key part of our strategy at some point moving in the future. I would assume, I would guess. Same way that BIM is now as part of our delivery method.
And I think actually the final question that I want to close is, there's a lot of people who enter the industry and want to pursue innovation or help bring technology to site. And I think it can be challenging because that innovation role isn't always clear on how to actually get involved in that role. And it also sometimes feels risky because in some companies, it's like, what's the ROI on innovation? Can I do it? So I think what advice would you give to someone who cares about technology and innovation? How do they go about, what are the skills that they should get, on the construction side or in the field before going, hey, you'll be really great in innovation and making a career here?
I guess the best advice I can give is don't give up.
Yeah.
You gotta have a lot of grit,
Yeah.
a lot of patience, right? You have to simplify things for people so they can understand what is it that you're trying to do. Any technology, any new technology that I've tried to deploy, it's never been easy. There's always going to be people that don't understand it. There's always going to be people that don't agree with it because they don't see the value, right? And so don't give up on it. Have some grit. And be patient. Yeah, so it's almost like, go. Having field experience, all that's great, but you need those soft skills of communication, culture change. How do you get, this person who's been on a job site for 40 years to trust using a new solution that they've never touched? Yeah. You have to break it down for people. And so I'll give you an example. Where the business side of technology really started making sense for me was when I was able to articulate why a piece of technology is good for us. What's the value proposition? And what is the simple process, manual process that it's replacing and helping us be faster and better at? Yeah. You have to be able to explain that. And how, is that a skill that's owned, or does it come from really understanding the problem and being able to frame that problem that allows you to... You have to practice that. Yeah. It's not something it's not easy for most people. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I think I'd end it there. Thank you so much for your time, and that was a really, really interesting conversation. Awesome. So thank you. Thank you very much.